Good afternoon. I'd like to invite everyone to be with us this evening for our special meeting called for the audit for this past year, and there will be another agenda item that we'll discuss in just a couple minutes. Before we get started, I'd like our student members to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. After we take a brief moment for a moment of silence, and I would like to bring your attention to the fact the superintendent is not here. Superintendent Baker unfortunately had a minor accident this morning, and in her best interest that she not be on her feet at the moment, so we'll remember her and to get back to work real soon. I'm sure she will be. I think she's listening to us or participating perhaps. Are you there, Barb?
I am here, Mr. Woods. Thank you.
Well, we hope you're doing well and get some good results and get back on your feet and ready to go again.
Thank you.
Okay, if you please stand for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Garrett. First part of the business is there is an addition to the agenda that was sent out. The addition is under new business B, return to extracurricular activities. That will be an action item this evening. We'll have discussion and an action on that. But as you can see, there are only two items to look at this evening, so I'll take a motion to adopt the amended agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Motion by Matthew to approve the agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Charlotte. Discussion. All those in favor of the amended agenda, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And we do have an agenda. We'll ask our Director of Finance, Schweitzer, to introduce our guests and to lead us through this year's audit.
Good evening. We have this evening Daniel Porter. He's the lead from the Northern Haverford with our government audit division. And then Brianna Callis. This year she took a larger leadership role in our audit. As you are aware, Mr. Murray retired, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago. He stepped back, and so now, you know, they're building the capacity of Brianna, and she's here with us. And so Daniel will start with the.
Okay, well, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Saw you about this time last year.
Yeah, who would know that we'd all be sitting here with masks on,
You're
looking like bandits. So you have 2 letters in front of you, and one of them does not have a big bold heading at the top of it. So I'll go over that one that doesn't have the big bold heading with you first. This is the required communication with government, being you all. And these are the things that we are required under both U.S. auditing standards and government auditing standards to cover with the board at the end of the audit engagement. So the first section is under the subheading significant audit findings. We are required to let you know of any significant new auditing standards and accounting standards that were implemented this year. And there was a significant accounting standard that was implemented. It was Government Accounting Standard number 84, and it changed the way that you evaluate fiduciary activities. In your financial statements, you have 3 things that are fiduciary activities. One was your school activities, the other is the OPEB holdings, and the third is the pension holdings. So this year, under GASB 84, we had to reassess, or your finance team had to reassess whether or not the school activities qualified anymore as a fiduciary activity. Fiduciary, like you're holding somebody else's money. And one of the criteria under GASB 84 was that you can't you can't have administrative control, which you actually do at the school level. You approve the expenditures through the principals and the administrative folks there. So there was a prior period adjustment where we bought the beginning balance of that cash, $643,000. You see that number there, and essentially your finance team brought it in and made it your cash. So that was just to, and that required a prior period adjustment, increasing your equity, increasing your cash. So that was the accounting standard that was new this year. We're also required to tell you if there are any significant and highly sensitive estimates used in preparation of financial statements. And last paragraph, first page, we would just want to point out that the OPEB liability and the pension liability have a huge amount of assumptions that go into those actuarial valuations. And those are explained in note 8 and 10, the assumptions. We evaluate those assumptions for reasonableness as a part of our audit and also for compliance with accounting standards. And our job is to tell you that we didn't find anything about the assumptions or the way that those estimates were put together that we find or that we have a disagreement with. We get a representation letter from your management team at the end of the audit engagement, and that is going to be that is signed today, and that is where the management team takes responsibility for all the assertions in the financial statements, the completeness, the existence of everything that we've asked for, and we have that, we delivered that representation letter to your management team. We're not aware of, the next section there is we're not aware of any consultations, like shopping for a second opinion that the team here, that the finance or the management team did here in relation to the financial statements or the accounting this year. And then the last section talks about other matters related to required supplementary information, but I'll cover that in our opinion on the financial statement. So now if you would take the largest document that you have, which is your financial statements for the year ended June 30, 2020. And if you go to the page right behind the index, that's our opinion on the financial statement. And our opinion is from pages 1 through 3. And what we're telling you is that we've audited the financial statement, all the governmental activities, each major fund, and the remaining funds and the remaining fund information for the year ended June 30, 2020, including the notes to the financial statements, and that we have conducted that audit in accordance with both U.S. auditing standards and government auditing standards issued by the Comptroller General of the U.S. And we issue our opinion on the second page, and that is an unmodified opinion that we feel that the financial statements, based on our audit procedures, are presented fairly in all material respects for all the funds and for the government as a whole. We have an emphasis of matter paragraph that points out to any reader that the school board did implement GASB 84 this year. And then we talk about in the last paragraph on the second page of our opinion that we have applied certain limited procedures to what's referred to as required supplementary information, which would be the management discussion and analysis portion of the financial statements, as well as the tables in the back of the financial statements that show trend information on the OPEB and the pension liability. The last page just points out to the reader of your financial statements that along with performing a financial statement audit, we are required to test internal controls and give you a report on not only internal controls of our financial reporting, but also compliance with laws, regulations, and other matters. And that's the letter that has the big bold heading on the top, so you have a copy of that. And what that letter says to you is that in planning and performing our audit of financial statements, this is under the big bold heading internal control or financial reporting, we didn't identify any deficiencies in internal controls that we consider to be material weaknesses. Now, what the definition of that would be that there is a breakdown in internal controls such that it would create a material error in your financial statements. The second page says we also tested compliance with certain provisions of laws, regulations, contracts, and grants, and that we didn't find any instances of non-compliance when we performed those tests. So that is our report on internal control and on compliance with laws and regulations. So altogether, a very good result from the audit, and Brianna at this point will cover the results of our single audit.
So starting on page 1 of the single audit, it's in the skinny package now. The first paragraph, we have audited the board compliance with the tests of compliance requirements described in the compliance supplement and have a direct and material effect on the board's major federal programs for the year. In the second paragraph, it describes management responsibilities for the compliance with federal statutes, regulations, and the terms and conditions of its federal awards applicable to federal programs. Our responsibility is to express an opinion on compliance for each of the board's major federal programs based on our audit of the types of compliance requirements referred above in the compliance supplement. In our opinion, the board, in all material respects, complied with the types of compliance requirements referred to priorly that could have a direct and material effect on each of the major federal programs for the year ended. We did not identify any deficiencies in internal control over compliance that we considered to be material weaknesses. However, there may be material weaknesses that may have existed and we have not identified. And on the last page of the report, in our opinion, the schedule of expenditures of federal awards is clearly stated in all material respects in relation to basic financial statements. On page 5, the total federal awards for this year was $4,574,843. On page 6, starts our notes to the single audit. Our major program, we audited this year was Title I, with total federal expenditures of $1,106,489. On page 7 is just the reconciliations to basic financials that Allison will go over shortly. There's 2 reconciliation items. One is for the JROTC payments received for contracting services, and the other is the Medicaid payments received for providing patient care services. There were no 2019 audit findings. And on the last page is a summary of what we uploaded to the Federal Audit Clearinghouse. There was an unmodified opinion on the financial statements being mentioned. There's an unmodified opinion on the compliance for our federal awards. And once again, the Board of Education qualified as a low-risk audit. In my opinion, that's the best sentence of the whole evening. So if you all will return to the sticker bound copy, page 4, that's where the management discussion analysis begins. And I'll review that portion as well as our financial statements and review some of the notes. So the MD&A presents the management's narrative overview of the financial statements and highlights things that affected the financial statements. So this portion is prepared by myself and the finance team, and then the Behavior group reviews it, and there's a team effort in there to make sure that we hit all of the compliance factors that we need to hit so that the reader understands what happened in this fiscal year. On page 14 is the statement of net position. statement of net position is a district-wide look at our financials, at the board's financial statements. We're reporting on the system as a whole. So it's everything all rolled up. Uses methods similar to private sector, and this is the full accrual basis version of the financial statement. So as Daniel reported earlier, the board adopted a new accounting standard on fiduciary accounts, GASB 84. The assets for student activity accounts, the flexible spending accounts, and the health reimbursement accounts are all captured here now. You'll no longer see a statement of fiduciary net position for agency funds. And then we also removed the supplementary information school activity fund revenue and expenditure sheet that was at the end of the financial statement, because that's embedded within the general expense fund. And as he stated, that that is detailed on note 15 on page 51. When you go to the deferred outflows of resources, we had a pretty significant increase there of $9.4 million deferred outflow of resources. The prior year it was $2.4 million. And this is a result of the net pension liability increase as well as the the net OPEB liability increase. The total assets and deferred outflows of resources are up $8.6 million to $69,345,460. That's 14.12%. In the middle section are the liabilities. In the long-term liability section, that's where the most significant change falls. Again, that is due to the additions of the net OPEB liability. There was an increase of $10.4 million with respect to that, and then the net pension liability increased $0.5 million. The board's net position did decrease this year. You see $8.1 million or $8.2 million at the bottom on page 14. That's down from a restated $11.6 million. One item of note that I would like the board to recognize is that the net investment in capital assets did increase this year. I believe this is the first year that I have been here that it has increased, which means that the board is investing at a higher rate than the assets are depreciating off. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. On the next page, you'll see the statement of activities. This is also a district-wide perspective of our financial statements. It emphasizes the determination of net cost of providing our educational services. So you'll see the governmental activities that you are all accustomed to seeing in the reports that I provide for you. And then the total expenses are there. And then across the top are the direct revenues that are attributed to those expense activities. So the charges for services this year looks different from last year because of this is where we're flowing the student activity account transactions. So that's why you see that increase.
Tell me that again.
Yeah.
Page 15.
Page 15.
Charges
for service, instruction, other.
Okay, and the 909. Because, okay.
And that now represents,
Well, a portion of that, I'm not sure if it's 100% of that, but, the greatest majority of that is the student activity account, charges for services,
so where did it used to be before?
they were on their own statement of revenue and expenditures. That was the chart that I explained that we removed from the financial statement.
Right, you have three different groups in there.
Right. The
Right.
student activity
Yeah.
account, the FSA account, and the HRA.
Because, yeah, on page 14, I think that we added, under that position, the restricted for school activity, that's the new line on that page, correct?
Yeah.
Was it shown?
You are correct.
Okay.
How does that qualify as charges for service? Oh, that money, the money that we were shown in the back of the book before at each school, how much they had made, that's a fundraising that's done by the principal, by the school itself, not by any, not groups,
Some of it is
grants.
passed through where a student is going on a field trip and the field trip costs $15 and the parents write a check for $15 to the school. The school turns around and pays the bus contractor for the field trip. So those were the charges for service, charges to go on the field trip.
But it's like picture money, right? That
It is, yeah,
Could
yeah.
Another activity account might be, gate receipts that are withheld, in an account for athletics or whatever else could be. Be a drama production where there was money brought in for that production in terms of ticket sales. There's so many activities, especially, well, I can only speak at Southern, but there were probably 50 to 75 different activity lines.
so it's held, and it's still held in that account, so it can be accessed by the teacher or the person that did the activity. The school still has the same type of account, same type of, access to that.
The principal has access to all the accounts. Everything has to flow through the principal to get the money.
Right, right.
But it's all still there under that pretense. If you put money in because of a field trip that you were taking, later on in the year, and as Allison said, people were giving money towards that, that money's kept solely in that one activity. It can only be used for that sole activity.
Okay, okay. And they still have access to it that way. Okay, thank you.
So the total expenses of total governmental activities increased $5 million or 8.15%. There was an increase in administration. There was an increase in maintenance and operation. And then fixed charges increased based upon the requirement to fund the solvency payment for the healthcare trust, as well as overall healthcare costs increase. The program revenues this year, the operating grants and contributions, which under the program revenues heading is the middle column, operating grants and contributions. That's $11 million, up from 10.2 or 8.10% over last year. So then there's the listing of the general revenues. So the general revenues are the requirement from our government to fund the remaining costs of our educational program. So the way you can kind of think about it is that the top portion is what we make money to fund specific programs. So like for transportation, we receive a very sizable amount of funding from the state that's specific for the transportation. to the remaining amounts that the, state and local formulas are funding of our transportation this year was only about $850,000. So that's one way to think about this statement. It does slow down to our change in net position, which is, down $3.4 million. You go to the next page, we have our balance sheet for rental funds. This provides more detailed information about the funds, not the school system as a whole. This is a budgetary presentation of individual fund financial information utilizing the current financial resources, measurement, and budgetary basis of accounting. So here you see your three funds all together. This generally focuses on the current financial resources that can be readily converted to cash flow in and out. This is how the board is most used to seeing their financials. The balances that are left at the end of the year are available for spending. So at the very bottom section of fund balances, that's normally the place that most people are most interested in, as well as the changes there. And so from a restated point of view of the fund balances, the board is down $1.2 million. The major changes here, the non-spendable inventories, which is the food service inventory, is up slightly. The capital lease payment is no change. The assigned for subsequent years budget has decreased about $937,000. The restricted for medical assistance decreased as well. That was in largely due to the fact that the last quarter of the school year there were no reimbursements able to be billed, and the expenses continued on. You'll see the new category of restricted for school activities. That is the balances of the cash and short-term investments of the schools. So you'll see the 2021 operating budget placeholder $485,000 that is in your approved budget. The amount that's remaining that the board has assigned for capital expenditures is $488,296, and then the unassigned is not changed.
Yes.
Do you have a device with you to see what we're talking about?
No, but I read it beforehand.
Oh, okay, if you would like to have my device, you can follow along.
I've been peeking it.
Okay, let's just make sure nothing interrupts. If you change your mind, it's, I don't have the device.
I understand.
So the next page is a reconciliation to show how we went from budgetary to full accrual. And it refers to these large deferred outflows as a result of the swing in the net OPEB liability and the net pension liability. And on page 18, the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balances with the home rental fund. This is the budgetary basis. So the expenditure portion here is what the board is most used to seeing on its budget documents, on the quarterly financial, the quarterly financial report that we present, and so you're most familiar with it. The current expense, which is the first column, that includes the unrestricted and unrestricted activity, as well as that's where the student activity account transactions lie now. So you'll see in the revenues, the charges for service is higher than it normally has been. As you work through how that's all restated. Okay, if you turn to page 20, the current expense fund unrestricted. This is modeled exactly off of what the board sees in your quarterly financial report. So while we don't provide the revenues, you do see the expenditures. The revenue for the state sources, as you can see from the original budget to the final budget, it did increase pretty significantly, and that was due to the blueprint funds. If you'll recall, the board approved their budget prior to all of the rules and conditions being published on what those blueprint funds were, what we were going to have to do to receive those. So a portion of them are here in the unrestricted, and a portion of them are in the restricted. But that's the largest difference in the revenues from original to final budget. Then in the actual revenues, you'll see again the charges for service, but the total revenues were 0.5% off of the final budget. So that was pretty good. So then in the administration or in the expenditure portion, we did end the year over budget in administration, instructional salaries, fixed charges, and food service. The administration, the reason that we were over budget in administration was due to the fact that the indirect cost rate changed during the year. It significantly decreased, so we were unable to take the full indirect cost transfer that we had budgeted.
Why did that happen?
The way that MSE has us calculate the indirect cost, due to the federal requirements changed. And so,
They're not
there
allowing
there were some items that had to be excluded that had previously been included. And so it had a negative effect on us.
Yeah.
But we know the new rules, and we're working on making sure that we get it up within reason. So the fixed charges are over budget because due to the healthcare trust solvency amount that was paid. If you recall, in June there was a budget transfer that the board approved to move $750,000 there. At that time, we were uncomfortable moving any more from any other place, and we also had not received from the county what that final amount was going to be. So then food service, this food service fund was also over budget, and that was due to funding that fund's deficit. So basically the unrestricted current expense fund used up a little over $1 million of fund balance this year, which was planned. So overall, the expenditures were within 0.2% of the final budget. So. Okay, on the next page, page 21, that's the restricted fund. The variances that you see here in the over/under budget are due to timing differences. Most grants don't just run during our fiscal year, So, some of them start before, some of them start after, some of them run 18 months, some of them run 2 or 3 years. So that's why you'll see that, the budget to actual have much wider ranges of variances. For total revenues here, we're up, a little over $100,000 or 2%. And, the reason was because of the Daniel Offutt gift that's running through the Garrett County Public School Foundation. So that's in the other sources. It's not federal, it's not state, it's in other sources. Okay, on the next page is the detailed picture of the food service fund. Overall, the fund is down slightly in revenue. It's only down $31,332. As you're aware, the coronavirus situation has put this department into a whole different way of operating. And so the meals and food served, which are the children's payments for their food, was eliminated. That revenue source was basically eliminated March 13th when school was closed. So through waivers by USDA, Mr. Germain was able to begin what's called the summer feeding program, and then also capture some adult, some other supper and snack revenue sources. So while his revenue is fairly consistent with last year, the makeup of it is different. And you can review how the federal has changed on page 5 of the single audit. With respect to the expenditures for the food service fund, the salaries and wages were up about 14%, $362,699. And that was due to the fact that we continue to pay our food service employees, but there were other expenses with delivering the summer feeding program, combined with the fact that there was a solvency payment to the healthcare trust. So the fund balance for food service fund of $169,337 is purely the food inventory. Okay. On the next page, 23, this is the OPEB trust fund statement of fiduciary net position. So right before this page, there used to be the statement of fiduciary net position for the agency funds, and so that's not here anymore. The total assets here are up $93,873. Go to the next page, on page 24. There's the statement of changes. The largest change is that the board did not contribute to the funds this year. Last year there was a contribution, and unfortunately, due to economic conditions, it was not recommended to the board to make the contribution. So the net increase that you see is purely driven by the investment earnings. The investments are held in a trust fund with First United, and that was when Annette Chapman came and spoke to the board and presented how their investment strategies, and they're all within the guidelines of the investment plans that the board has provided to them.
What do we realize this year? On the return on investment?
It was 5.6%.
Is that the 93,000?
Yes.
Did you say 5.6?
Yes.
Thank you.
So if you would please turn to page 34. We'll dive into the notes section. The notes are an integral and essential part of the financial statements and should be read along with them. Note 2 provides the details of all the cash and cash equivalent and investments of the board's funds. So another change here on page 34 is that this summary chart has a third column in the middle for agency funds. The agency fund is now embedded with the governmental activities. Okay. If you could please turn to page 37, capital assets. The management team did complete several projects that had been sitting in construction in progress. They include the Northern High PA and bell replacement, the Northern High sewer replacement, the Southern High partial roof replacement, Southern High security vestibule, Southern Middle systemic renovation, the fire alarm, the roof, and the sewer system, and then the Tyler Munis ERP software conversion. We also wrote off or disposed of the Northern Road and parking lot project that had been started several years ago. The finance team has been working for several years on the conversion to Munis. And this year, we completed the fixed assets portion of the conversion. And the staff accountant, Ashley Philippi, worked very hard to implement that module of Munis, and we're happy to say that it's completed now. On the next page, you'll see the construction projects that are still active as of 6/30. I think all of these, Mr. Wozlowski reviewed at the last board meeting, showing you all pictures. His presentation of it was much more exciting than this one, but you'll see the remaining commitment to complete the project. So, very close on several of them. Some of them are actually completed as of now, but this was as of 6/30. So if you turn to the next page, note 5, long-term liabilities. This provides a summary of the board's long-term liability transactions and the changes. So this is where you're seeing the big effect to the net position with the net OPEB liability addition and then the net pension liability. The 10.4 million and then 524,000. You can turn to page 41 now, note 8, other post-employment benefits other than pension. So this note provides the details of the actuarial report for net OPEB liability, the changes in the net OPEB liability, and also information about the board's plan. So this is the second year of using the same census data and the valuation. So the number of employees didn't change and the covered payroll didn't change here. We go to the next page, on the 42. We did have assumption and method changes of $9.6 million. Yes, I am.
Well, on page 41, is that where you was referring to the number of employees did not change?
Yes.
How does it not change? Like, explain that to me. Like, I don't.
They only take the valuation information every other year.
Okay,
So we're in the second year, so it'll change next year.
next year, okay.
So there were two changes that created this, this very, very large net change. One was that, our actuary had to begin using a mortality rate that was based on a different scale. It's based entirely on teachers. And that was not favorable for our net OPEB liability, as well as the assumption change of the discount rate. So that decreased from 3.5% to 2.21%. So there's a inverse relationship. As the discount rate goes down, the liability goes up. So, weight is right there. One way that the board can affect change here is if it did adopt a funding policy, even if it was a small amount every single year. If there was a policy that was adopted, a better discount rate would be able to be used here. So.
Certainly something you need to ensure that you bring back to us, you know, as we start the new year.
Absolutely.
Yes.
On page 42, some of the paragraphs, should those dates say, like it says January 1, 2019, should it say January, or is that right? Like below it, it says the period of January 1, 2018 through December 31, 2018. Should it be January 1, 2019 through December 31, 2019? You know, the years. Should the years be different, or is that right?
No, because remember, we're using an older valuation. If we had used a new valuation, then it would be January 1st of 2020.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because the year before, they were, that's what I was looking comparing, okay. So you're saying probably next year then it might change? the date.
Absolutely next year.
Okay.
Yes, we only do the valuation every other year.
Okay.
Okay, so if you could please turn to page 46. That's note 10 for state retirement plan. The state contributes on behalf of the board each and every year. This year it was $2,860,880, which were equal to the state's required contribution for that year. The board's contribution for the year ended June 30th, 2020 was $1,083,257 and $352,125 to TRS and ERS respectively, which were equal to the board's required contribution. So the TRS is the teachers portion and the ERS is the employees portion, which includes custodial and cafeteria personnel. On the next page, here it says, because the state of Maryland pays the unfunded liability and the local board of ed pays the normal cost for the tax to the teacher's pension, the local boards of education are not required under GASB 68 to record their share of the unfunded pension liability for the TRS, but instead that liability is recorded in the state of Maryland. So we don't have to record that. We do have to record the ERS portion. So, keep going back to page 51. This is note 15, which details the restatement that was made for GASB 84. And as Ms. Siebold started to ask a couple questions about this GASB, or this statement implementation, the financial team, led by Robin Story, has been working on this implementation all fiscal year. The schools, each school has converted their school activities, their checking accounts, to be recorded in Munis now. Kayla Cathell at Southern High School has been an incredible team member for us. She's been the eyes and ears for the school secretaries and helped us through this with the challenges and the training. But next year, we will be fully implemented so that there are proper controls in place, and we can perform a lot easier reporting and efficiently at the end of the fiscal year. So the project's not completely finished. There's still some training that's going on, some follow-up to get some pieces fine-tuned, but Robin Story and Kayla Castle have worked really hard on the project. So then when you go back to page 52, we're almost done here. The schedule of changes in the board's net OPEB liability and related ratios. So this chart appeared a couple years ago, and we will continue to add columns until there are 10 years represented here, so that the reader can see historical changes in our OPEB liability. You'll see the same for the net pension liability in the next page. That concludes my portion of the presentation. So, if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions by any of the board members?
The increase in the OPEB liability, is that basically driven by the increase in, is it more increase in the insurance costs, or is it a projected insurance costs, or is it increase in employees, or?
It was driven by the change in that mortality rate table.
So that the mortality rate table, so the mortality rate, the age went up, is that what you're saying?
Well, we had to change from the way that the actuary described it to me, we changed from a more general one to a specific teacher mortality table.
Where did that come from? God, yeah. I wasn't aware that I had such a thing.
Because in previous years, we used RP 2000 healthy annuitant mortality table for males. And this year, we had to use a mortality table that was based on public teachers, public education.
So there's a big difference in that?
Yes.
Yeah, huh? Teachers are living a lot longer.
Well, that and the discount rate.
Other questions?
I have.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, page 20. Okay, charges for services. The original budget was like 45,000 under original budget, charges for services under revenue. And then the final budget was changed to 922,000. and then it was actually 935,000. How did we accomplish that?
When we implemented the student activity account.
Oh, that affected that.
Yeah, we created a journal entry in the budget amendment to increase the revenue and the expenditure to account for that.
So in expenditures, where,
It's in instruction other, went from 627,196 to 1,115,554.
okay. And the 922,000 or 935,000 is all the three things that were pulled? So there was three different things that you pulled to make up that. You only pulled 600 and some thousand, 643 was in the one account. But there were two other things that were included in there.
643,000 was the restatement to the fund, to the balance in the assets for the restated FY19. The actual revenues and expenditures were different amounts. And I'm sorry, I don't have exactly what the student activity account revenues and expenditures were in front of me. Not all of the charges for service are student activity accounts, but the vast majority of it is.
Okay, another question. Having the pandemic, the fact we haven't been in the schools, I was looking at comparisons, and I think this is page 20 also. Like operation of plant. When I look at the difference in last year's and this year's under operation of plant, there's like 559,000, $500,000 more spent in operation of plant than the year before. My thought, I don't know what increased it, my thought would be that it would have decreased.
Well, we had utility savings, but we did purchase items at the end of the year, cleaning equipment, because we knew we had some utility savings. We were purchasing some items. There's also operation of plant includes all of the custodial salaries. So we did have quite a bit of overtime in the custodians who were on-site cleaning during the executive order of closure. So while there were utility savings, there were expenses in other areas.
I was hoping those would sort of balance out, but I guess $500,000 difference there. So.
But it's still favorable to the final budget. So we would really need to go back to the FY20 budget of what was planned or added from FY19, and then also reconcile the unexpected expenditures that occurred throughout the fiscal year.
Most of those items, non-perishable items, or are there items that will be, the custodial items, the operational plant items, are those non-perishable things, or were they?
For the most part. There's some cleaning solutions and items that have a shelf life, but those items honestly didn't arrive before the end of this fiscal year. They arrived just before the Jump Start program.
So in essence, we're paying it forward. We're buying things now that we would be buying in our next budget cycle.
I noticed in past years that there was a letter that was sent to the Rhoda group that when I went back through my audits, I did not see that we had sent them a letter. Is that new? Is that something we're doing now that we hadn't done in the past? Because I didn't have it in any of my stuff that where we had transmitted, a letter to the group. They send us letters.
I believe we send a letter every year. I don't know that it's
I don't think we've gotten, I don't think we,
but
I don't think because I went back through my, how I save stuff.
we did it this year.
We got
Mr. Wood signed it just before the meeting began, and we have already scanned it to our, so it's right here. It's done.
Well, I'm asking why, why we did it this year. I couldn't find it in past. When you say it was done, we just think that copies of it.
I saw it somewhere.
Yeah, we got it.
I thought I saw it somewhere in the.
Yeah, it's in there, but I'm saying in the past years, it's not been a past practice. Yes, to do that. But maybe we just didn't know it was being done. Thank you.
On page 44, note 9, operating leases. It says operating leases primarily for the instructional and operations equipment with $90,948. What is operational equipment?
This is the multifunction device copier.
Okay, okay. All right.
I wanted to say too, I should say this publicly so that staff can be acknowledged. I spoke to one of the vendors who bid on the last bidding cycle, which did not get the bid. But he was extremely complimentary of how that process went. And he said, we do bids all over the United States. He said, but I want you to tell your director of finance that the person who represented that company came back and said, boy, they were really on top of everything. So I want you to know that that's unsolicited. He said, for sure, let you know that.
They have been since they started that process several years ago. Allison brought that process in when she was in her former position, and I, as a building principal, was extremely impressed with how I was part of that team and was really impressed with
Very impressed. Sad they didn't get it, I'm sure, but still complimentary.
Well, we're happy that the board approved a 36-month rather than
Yeah.
60 months, so, anyway.
Page 36, note 3, inter-fund balance for transfer. It shows current expense school construction. Like, would the turf field, money allocation be shown in here somewhere, or what would that be?
Where did you say good morning, Council?
Page 36,
36.
it's under school construction.
Okay, thank you.
The turf field would be part of school construction.
So would that money represent that, or what would that represent?
That was a composition of all of the school construction.
All the school construction, okay. So some of that would be turf field and other projects then.
Yeah, the turf field only ended the year at like just shy of $90,000 completed. Wasn't much of that.
So is it during this past year, we put in the OPEB money, right? The $375?
Only 1 year. In FY19, there was a $375.
So that was in the last year.
Mhm.
Okay, that's why I couldn't find that. Couldn't figure out where it was. Okay.
Page 33. On G, net position flow assumptions. Which policy is that? It says it is the board's policy to consider restricted net position to have been depleted before unrestricted net position defined. Is that been used in the GASB something, or what was it? Board policy. To that refer to one of our actual policies or just
Page what?
page 33?
Oh, 33.
Which letter?
Under G, the last sentence for G, says it is the board's policy. I didn't know if it's referring to like a policy procedure? Or is that just,
That's a component of the fund balance.
Yeah,
When you adopted your
yeah.
comprehensive fund balance,
Yeah.
policy, that piece.
Right.
okay.
To use the grant money for,
That's a good policy.
okay, okay.
Yeah.
Stick the money on the table.
Page 34, it says note 2, it would be you have, lines and numbers, it'd be the first paragraph. The last sentence where it says, the long last sentence. The board's name, $1,231, exposed to custodial credit risk as it was uninsured and collateralized with securities held by the board's agent but not in the board's name. Does that refer to what we have at First United?
Now, what this refers to is that the financial institutions that hold our accounts, hold our funds, have to have collateralized or have to have securities in place as basically insurance in order to be able to cover our balances. And so as our balances change every day, they have a program that's written to look to see how much value of securities they should have in our name. And so right at 6:30, it was short by $1,231.
Okay.
So it's beyond the FDIC insurance.
Sounds like where you said the banks, they do the sweep accounts in them? Or that's something?
That's one of our products
Okay.
that we have, but because it's government funds, they have to have, the financial institution has to own securities of the value of our accounts, of our cash. So that if something were to happen to their deposits, they could sell those securities and be able to give us our cash. In theory, that's
Right.
the thought.
Or we pay out 1,000.
Right. So all $1,231.
Next.
Good.
I thought it was she, when she talked, she answered.
I did have one more thing.
Okay.
So, one more, okay. So as I read through, about the change in the one, amount of money that the principals had, we did have words in there saying, that this cash, equivalent cash belonging to the student and faculty organization and cash accumulated on behalf of, employees and former employees under HRA and flex spending is reported as restricted, cash for government fund and government-wide reporting purposes. But in the school activities fund, when you read that, it said that the school activities funds are agency funds used to account for assets held by the board in a trustee capacity. These funds belong to student and faculty organizations within each school and are under the direct responsibility of each school principal. So do we have a policy saying that? Because we don't have it in, that's not an indication any longer in the in our
Well,
book.
actually, if you turn to page 16,
16, okay,
where the fund balances are detailed,
okay.
restricted for school activities.
Okay, so you're saying that is what determines that it is?
Yes, within the financial statement.
Okay,
Daniel, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, and then if you right up above that on page 16, the cash and the investments are also segregated as restricted. So even though now they're in the current expense fund, they're still, not only are they in separate bank accounts, but they're segregated on the face of the financial statements and in the general ledger. So,
okay, so that's like having a
Yeah.
policy.
well, you also have a school activities policy that's very comprehensive as it relates to internal control at the school level, like how the reconciliations for events are to be done, how controls are to be implemented at the school level so that you don't, try to prevent an issue of somebody's money walking away at the school level.
Right, okay, and that's what I wanted to get back to. Do we need to make any changes in that policy because of the change we've made here?
Actually,
Does that
no,
warrant?
and the reason is because you actually just, based on what Allison was saying about the project, significantly increased control over school activities funds. Because by centralizing the accounting, by moving it to Munis General Ledger, and
Okay.
having the central accounting team doing a lot of the reconciliation and control, it just adds another level of control over those accounts that wasn't even there before.
Okay,
But the policies themselves, as far as how things are to be handled at the school level operationally, are all still valid, except for the fact that in the last 3 months, you didn't do much of the school activities,
Right.
things that you did in the past.
right, okay, thank you. That was my concern, thank you. Okay, thanks, Tom.
Yeah, that was always a mystery black hole for me when I first became the principal of Southern High School. I tried to figure out, okay, where is this money? Where's it really housed? And, so I think we made a lot of improvements over those 12 years that I've been gone to make sure that the money is accounted for at many different levels.
I just have two more that I can
Okay,
say.
no, go ahead.
I just see like, when you look at page 7, you look at your percentage change on the right. The big change with, is your capital grants and contributions, and that would be, would that be some of, because of the COVID,
Actually, none of the CARES Act grants were spent prior to the end of the fiscal year. So they will you'll see all of those next year when we have close to $2.5 million of additional revenue in our restricted funds. The capital grants and contributions is because of the school construction.
Oh, okay. And then on there, there's also, the other percentage that's changed is 32.71% is deferred outflows of resources. So what does that all entitle to the top?
That's where you're gonna pick up that net OPEB liability change and the net pension change.
And then like, just to keep what we're saying, like, I don't remember seeing a letter like this before that we had written and addressed to the reviewer group and then signed, but when I looked at number 37 on it, it says provisions for uncollectible receivables have been properly identified and recorded. What does that mean, uncollectible receivable?
Well, there comes a point in time where you realize you're not going to receive payment for some things from an accounts receivable that you booked. So at some point, you have to identify them and report them, correct?
On a school level, a good example, the textbook.
Somebody lost a textbook, told them they gotta pay X amount of dollars for it.
Which is what town would have to get that money.
Or an outside organization, we've sent them an invoice for rent or custodial, and the business has gone out of business. Yeah, they're just not going to pay you that money. So at some point, you just have to write it off.
So it doesn't happen a lot though, does it? I mean, 80%.
No, the largest, piece of uncollectible receivables that we had this year was in the food service, fund. However, there were gifts that came through the foundation, Angel Fund. There were, I think, a little bit over $15,000, and took care of all of those receivables. So we didn't have to write them off, but most years, there's an amount that meals that are exiting seniors or
Right.
students that have moved out of the area.
But nowhere, in the budget nor in the audit do we have, figures on donations, right? Money that's donated, like the money that was donated to the food service. I saw the advertisement in the newspaper, okay? It was in the newspaper that they were taking, if people wanted to give, and it listed the organization in the county, and we were one of those school lunches. We were in that advertisement. So those monies were to be sent to the foundation. But then when the foundation sends those monies to food service, is that an incoming for food service?
They were already booked as meals, like they were sitting on, we already sold the meal, they'd already eaten the meal, but they owed us the money. So it's the money that we received cleared their debt.
Okay, but
So that receivable is gone now because the money was received.
okay, but that money was given to help with the feeding during the pandemic. That's what that
All
ad
of the
was.
donations we received from the Garrett County Public School Foundation were earmarked for Angel Fund. We did not receive any funds for FY20 that were for
So Angel Funds is back payment of lunches?
They're just taking care of the debt.
student debt, writing off student debt.
So, but the advertisement in the newspaper was for,
I'm sorry,
like,
I
to
don't know what advertisement. you're
anybody
talking
see it?
about.
Community Action had it, and it told you where to send the money.
Yeah, I
The
remember.
Board of
seeing it.
Ed was
It's been a
in
while.
there.
I remember seeing it.
Okay, I'll find it. I'll get it. I'll find it.
But I do know what the last foundation meeting, we talked about the amount of money that had been raised, because there was a check that wasn't specifically, for that. We didn't know how to use the check, but it was to pay back debts, most of that money, if not all of that money that was given.
That'd probably be on community actions books, maybe, if they raise money and then disperse it.
Well, all the funds, any check that was received here at the central office was handed over to the foundation, and it flowed to the foundation.
But I'm talking about the ad she saw.
Oh, sure, yes, I guess, if the ad was by Community Action.
No, well, it was like a whole group of people, and it was different places you could spend monies too.
Yeah, I think it was, I believe during the, when schools were out, that if you wanted to, support the community, it listed places you could give your money to, and it was for, and it said for food. I remember seeing it. It had different places you could support. Yeah, I remember saying on
But
there.
I guess what you're saying is we received no monies that was going directly to our food service program. All monies we received, we sent through the foundation. Correct.
Everything that we received from the foundation went to write off.
And any monies that came here, we diverted to the foundation.
Yes.
I think it was what.
And
So how would it be on
that was through, and remember, we're talking about through, the end of June. So if it happened afterwards, It may have said for gas, and I haven't seen any of those receivables, but maybe, I don't know the timing of this ad that you're
Well,
talking
yeah,
about,
I'm gonna find it when I.
but maybe it happened
have to
after,
wait.
it happened in July or August, and so it would have been irrelevant to this report anyway.
I was just wondering how that money flowed. I was trying to follow how it flowed and where it in, you know, where it came out in reports.
Because then what she's saying, if it went to the foundation, like money was sent here to go to the foundation, then it wouldn't be represented on our audit book, correct?
It is
Oh, it still is?
part of our revenue.
Okay, well, that's what I was trying,
It's just diverted through them to us.
so it would be in a different category.
So the person who gives, the gift giver can receive the tax benefits of the gift.
Right.
So if they give straight to Garrett County Public Schools or the Board of Education, they cannot receive the same type of tax incentive. So depending on the size of the gift, it's prudent for the gift giver to give through the foundation. So as a practice, any check that we receive, whether it's $25 or $25,000, we send it, if it's a donation, we send it to the foundation.
So then everything that funnels through the foundation, it's all represented in here, the donations and.
It's
paid off, yeah.
Donated it back, if this foundation sent it back to the Board of Education, yes.
With like it, say it went to a certain school, so it would, you know what I mean? Like I remember one time money was donated for musical instruments or something, so then it would have funneled through the school, right? And from it went to the foundation.
We're going through that activity at the school.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, we show up on the school books. That's a donation from the CBS Foundation.
Is that what she was kind of asking, that it all represented?
No, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The superintendent has made a recommendation to me earlier that she would like for us to accept the audit report as presented by Rodehaver Group. So I'll entertain a motion as such.
I make a motion to approve the fiscal year 2020 financial statement
Report as presented by the Rodehaver Group. Thank you very much, Dr. Paul. For a second.
Second.
Second by Rodney. We have a motion and a second on the floor to accept the Rodehaver Group's audit ending in June 30th, 2020. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And we have a completed audit. Thank you, both of you, Daniel and Browman. Thank you very much for your help, and certainly thank you, Allison and all of your staff. Please tell all of your staff too. I know it's a very tedious job that I certainly would not want to ever have in my lifetime, but we appreciate very much.
Well, if we the help.
But you get it on, yeah. But you get it done on time, which is really good.
We appreciate that one sentence that says no time.
Yeah, always good.
Thank you both very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we got one more piece of business that I need to do, if my computer cooperates. As most all of you know, last week, the governor and the state superintendent indicated that they were in favor of a return to extracurricular activities among the public schools in the state of Maryland. So to that end, obviously all boards of education are grappling with that desire. So I've asked our director of secondary and certainly our director of athletics to be here tonight, Mr. Edwards, to field questions. Let us first of all have a discussion, and we'll see where we are after the discussion's finished. So I'm going to just open it up for questions for Paul, and unless you have an opening statement you'd like to make. But I did take the liberty today to send to the superintendent and to Mr. Edwards a number of questions that might arise tonight, just so that they would be aware that there's going to be, so obviously questions about, I think, more than anything else, the logistics of how we could do those. If in fact, this is out of order to do anything, but
certainly those are gonna be the questions that parents are gonna have, the people in the community are gonna have, logistically, how would you do it? So with that said, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's nice to see everybody. I'll try my best to answer whatever questions you have. I will say that, the announcement came out on September the 24th, and, it was, I don't want to say totally out of the blue, but it was not anticipated, and no one really had a heads up. Since that announcement was made, there's been a lot of scrambling, and whatever questions you all have here today will be relevant to the other 23 districts as well, so we've all been trying to get these answers. And every time you get an answer to a question, it creates 3 more questions. So I'm sure you will ask me some things today that I don't know the answer to, and I will try to get them for you. I have been in constant contact over the last week with my counterparts across the entire state, but specifically Washington and Allegheny County, and Frederick and Carroll, as that's our district, but also our principals, athletic directors, and other coaches and of course, the superintendent. And I think she's on the call. I don't know, Mrs. Baker, if you have anything to add.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Edwards. I do. You know, as he said, we were not quite prepared on the 24th for the plan to come out. We knew something was in the works. It was a pretty aggressive plan to come back October 7th and then begin competition about 3 weeks later. And philosophically, you know, it is difficult for our instructional leaders to consider extracurricular activities when all of our high school and all of our middle school and most of our elementary kids are not going to all be back in session by October 7th. However, you know, and that's why I'm glad Mr. Edwards is there to answer your questions and that you will be taking action. But, and I can certainly make my formal recommendation a little bit later, but I do believe, based on a number of factors, that October 7th, this plan does give our kids the best chance to be able to play and participate in very important extracurricular activities that they very much enjoy, and makes for a very nice high school experience. So I'll leave it at that for right now, because we've been grappling with the same things, as Mr. Edwards said, all across the state. But our metrics have remained steady, and I think this does give our kids the best opportunity to have a sports season. I'll conclude there for now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Baker.
My
Questions, go ahead, Ronnie, first.
Well, first question I have is the directive also geared towards extracurricular activities such as band competitions, those type things? Because I didn't see anything in there.
Ultimately, yes. I will say that all of the communication that has come out from MSDE, MPSSAA, and the governor's office has been specific to sport.
Right.
However, I think there's nothing to omit anything else. And we do have some guidance from from MSDE, for band.
Yeah, so, yeah, I don't know if these conversations are going on with the other districts on whether they're gonna have band competitions, how that's gonna work.
I do not think at this time from the conversation, and it's an interesting dynamic because most counties, the person in charge of marching band is not the person in charge of sports.
Right.
Few counties that are, we're one of the few, tends to be the smallest ones. So counties that I have been in contact with and in talking with Mr. Shaw and Mr. Dively, I don't know of any large-scale movement at the state level for band like is happening for sports. Not to say that there wouldn't be any of those, but I think the actual band competitions that we all know about, I don't know of any,
Yeah. Well, my feeling is that's just as important to those kids that are in band as the kids that are on the football field or on the track team or whatever. So, I'd just like to get clarification on that. I'm okay.
We have included band in every one of our, so when we did our return to play, we included band in it. We've always included band,
FFA, cheerleading, a lot of the other activities in our plan.
And if you go to football, you might want to have the band at the football game.
Well, those are some of the logistical questions that I think obviously can't be answered tonight in full, but, as you read the governor's, decree, for using a better word, you can have 100 participants indoors, or people indoors, 250 people out of doors at an event. So, that is a very limited number of people that will need to be decided by, someone.
Yeah, but the guidance also says you have to keep them 6 feet apart. So how are you gonna do that if you're at 50% capacity?
And wear a mask.
And then what are you gonna do with the food stands? And what do there's a lot of questions.
I spent a lot of time today working on all of that.
Okay.
Spoke to our health department, so there's a series of questions that go along with all of that. And, I did get clarification from the governor's office today that the 250 outdoor spectators or the 100 indoor spectators does include your players, your coaches, your officials, etc. So you're not at 200 paying customers, you're subtracting all of your participants, and then what's left over factors into the 250.
Basically, family members.
Anyone on the premise has to wear a mask, with the exception being the actual participants on the field or the court. People on the bench, people on the sidelines are supposed to have masks on, coaches are supposed to have masks on, so on and so forth. Concession stands I talked with the health department today. Concession stands can run, just as normal. There are some things there, that we've become accustomed to, marking on the floor of 6 feet, not allowing people to congregate, servers wearing masks, so on and so forth, but you can have your concession stands available and open. So we did check, we did try to get guidance and clarity on that because we knew, that October 7th date is the start date for practices, and then October the 27th would be the actual beginning of competition, but those are questions that people have already started asking right after the announcement.
Tickets, how would you do tickets? How would a person show up to the game, knowing that they can get in the game?
Well, and the other part about this is, since we shut down in March, in all of the MTSSA meetings up until literally the governor walking away from the podium on the 24th said, yeah, you can have up to 250 people. Everything up until that point was there will be no spectators. So that was a complete curveball to all of us. I'll tell you, in researching surrounding states, and talking with some parents from Preston County, and I don't know what their limits are. They're going to be different because different states are different in how they handle it. But apparently at Preston gets 2/3 of the allotted tickets, and 1/3 of the tickets roughly go to the visiting team that's coming in. In Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania's a little unique as well, but apparently, and some of the people I've talked to over there, they don't really have many restrictions to who can come and so on and so forth. There's some masking things facing. There's a controversy up there not too long ago that one team was threatening to not be able to have any more home games because they weren't following what protocols were in place. But we would have to look at how many participants are in the event, who else is going to come to the event. We talked about band, you're talking about other groups. If you're going to have a concession stand, they're going to factor in. I think when we start talking about this, most people zero in right away on football because that's sort of the season and it's your biggest draw. But, then you're looking at PA announcer, you're looking at yard line guys. It might get to the point where you have like 50 tickets left over. And then that's a big, how do you determine at that point? You're going to have a bus driver probably from the opposing team. There's a lot of discussion with the ADs and coaches and principals about it.
It doesn't make sense to me because there's counties like Garrett, where the metrics are really good, that you could get away with a bigger crowd size, and in a county that's got a positivity rate of 10 or 12%, and it's just, to have one size fits all just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And
There's
then,
a lot of things in this.
Yeah, I guess.
A lot of things.
But, that's right. I've discovered that over the years.
But with that number, it's always easier to like not have any.
Yeah, and why would you have food concessions if there's only,
Right.
30 people to sell it to?
Allegheny County, obviously did approve yesterday, I'm sure you're aware, they approved contingent upon, see, one thing we have to keep in mind is we're pretty well tied to Allegheny County. So if Allegheny County and Garrett County do different things, we either aren't gonna play anything against anybody other northern and southern, or we're gonna increase our travel budget by about 4 times to go to Howard and Montgomery and Prince George's County, because that'll be the only people we can play. Now, Allegheny County, I think, did put a caveat to their vote that they were contingent upon other counties and talking with my counterparts, their primary concern is us. Obviously, because we're in leagues together and everything else, but, knowing what they're doing, Carroll County, I think, is going to go. I think their board already gave direction to do that. Washington County is undecided, at this time. I think they could go either way. But all, if you're bringing a team from Washington County, we don't know what's gonna happen with buses either. So parents from an opposing school are asked to bring their kids, and then we tell them, well, you gotta drive around Oakland for 3 hours till the football game's over and come back and pick up the kids. There's a lot of stuff there.
So what do we do with, screening of the players and, contact tracing and,
So right now, it's a great question. Obviously, we have things going on now. We do have our plan, that was approved by the state. You all have seen it. All my correspondence here, I have it somewhere. So currently, until October 30, we're in the spring sports season. And everything they're doing now, everything they did in the summer, we do have the contact tracing form that was put out by MPSSAA, so the kid signs in, or the athletic trainer will write who was there, so we know everyone that's there every day, who was in the practice. They do get screened, when they start. So those things are in place and would remain in place. We do have some, discussions ongoing right now about, locker rooms and so on and so forth, that we need to work on. Talked with Mr. Wazlowski today a couple times about some transportation items. But we do have the contact tracing in place. I think we have a pretty robust contact tracing plan in place. I'm very pleased with it. We are doing temperature screens. We don't do the waivers anymore, been counseled against that, but MPSSAA did put out this, which all of our trainers and coaches have as of today. This is a athlete participation acknowledgement statement. Basically, it outlines all of the things that, first of all, every parent is aware of what COVID is and what the symptoms are, and then if you have these things, don't come to practice or to school or to the game. And then the parent and the student have to sign that, so theoretically, everyone would be aware of what the issues are and what to look for. So we do have some things in place to help trace and track and monitor that. And that's one reason why MPSSAA has kind of discouraged, and I think most local boards of education have discouraged playing across state lines, because every state handles it differently. So everyone in Allegheny County will be doing most of it, if not exactly the same things we are, so Washington County and so on, whereas maybe Preston County or Somerset County, Pennsylvania aren't doing those things.
Is there inclination about how many counties are going to go to an October 7th date, or wait until February 21st and the 1st and try to 6.
I think there will be way less counties that move on the October 7th date than don't. In our conversations, the 24 county athletic directors have met multiple times in the past week since the 7th. I think all of the boards of education are getting a lot of pressure to start from parents and community. But many of them, especially in the bigger counties, are reluctant to do so at this time for a whole host of reasons. Typically, the smaller, more rural, probably better metric counties are the ones that are most likely to go. Like I said, Carroll County's going, Allegheny County's going, whatever we decide tonight. I think Washington's maybe 50-50. Southern Maryland, surprisingly, or maybe not, on those calls has been pretty vocal about trying to get started, but there's nothing official there. But everyone else, including the Eastern Shore, has been real hesitant to
Their
advocate.
metrics are going up.
And this may be a question that you can't answer.
Or maybe you don't ask about it.
Let's say that we start and we get into
Second week of November and things,
don't go well, okay? We have to stop. Is that season over for those kids? I mean, is that season finished now? There is no new fall season under the 6-6-6 plan?
Well, this is about the third iteration of a plan that the state put out. And I've got all of them rumbling around in my hollow head, so.
We'll get a new one tomorrow.
I think, it was either this last plan that came out or the one they put out a couple of weeks ago, that said if you get a couple of weeks into the season and you have to shut down, you can then opt into the second part of the season. But if you went beyond that, and I don't remember exactly what it wasn't halfway, it was less than halfway, but to your direct question, if you go 3 weeks and you have to shut down, you could then come back and opt in to see the second semester season. If you play the first 4 games of a 7-game season and you have to shut down, then your season's over. They won't let you then come back and opt into the second season.
Well,
Can you bifurcate? Can you be in the fall season now, opt out of the winter part of this plan and join in the 6-week plan?
I don't think so. I think the way I understood it on the last call with MPSSAA, you were in or out on the 7th, and you were basically in or out wherever.
Okay, final question, or at least another question. Do you, will there be a playoff system at all this year?
Short answer, no. That has been talked about probably the most of all of the county athletic directors. Mr. Warner of MPSSAA has assured us that there will not be state playoffs at all in any sport. Part of that is deemed the most dangerous as far as spread of the disease, because you're taking lots of different people from lots of different places and mixing them together. But also from a fairness issue of if you opt in now and then they have a state playoff in the spring and you're ineligible, that is not fair to the ones that opt in now, and vice versa. Sure. Now, what they did say in this new plan is they have some language in here for a culminating event or tournament. And the way that we interpret that is not necessarily playoffs, but think of the WestMAC, our athletic conference. You might play a true conference tournament for a soccer champion. So instead of just going by regular season wins, you'd actually play a tournament like a collegiate conference and get a championship.
By county wrestling championship.
Sure, exactly. Now, they did leave the door open. If the whole region went together and wanted to do something, not necessarily playoff, and you're not going to exceed your game limits and everything, that you could maybe work something out there. I don't see that happening in any sport. I think the conference stuff would be our best.
Okay, so you're playing, this week you're playing Team X. Get a call on Monday. Team X has 2 kids who tested positive. They're shutting it down. The state allows us now to find a new opponent?
Yes. many months ago now, one of the big news from NPSSA was there were, I think, 5 waivers that, the state gave NPSSA blanketly for all 24 geopolitical subdivisions. And one of those was, like in football, once you submit your schedule, that's your schedule past the first play date and you can't change it. One of the waivers was, because of this and the exact situation you used, you can change your schedule at any point, again, as long as you don't exceed the game limit for that sport for the week or for the season. You could change, the night before if you can make it happen. So
Paul, one of the greatest protocols that people are gonna be interested in is what would necessitate an outbreak that would stop everything cold? You know, what's that number? Because obviously people are gonna, that's the first question they're gonna ask. Well, if one player gets positive, does that stop everything? One coach?
I think there's my experience in this is that there are so many variables in that question that I can't sit here and answer. And I'll give you a real example. Depends on the sport, for first and foremost. Depend on the level of activity of the participant. Is it a coach? Is it a player? I think that makes a difference. Basically, the protocol would be we would speak to the health department. We would work with the health department, and they would help us make the determination of this necessitates we shut everything down, or just this particular student athlete or coach needs to be removed for 14 days, or whatever. I do know in other states, and again, every state is a little bit different, they have all responded differently to that scenario.
Yeah, I know in West Virginia, if one person affiliated with that program tests positive, that program is quarantined for 14 days. Just that program, but that program is quarantined for 14 days.
Well, I think it depends on how good your contact tracing is, how good your,
That's
testing is. If you're testing often, and you can identify something through the testing, or if somebody calls in and says, I don't feel good, and you go to their house and test them, you can, you know, if that person's been sick and playing with the team for 2 days, and, you know, you got a problem.
Yeah.
But if you can isolate them before they expose other players, so those are the type scenarios the health department would.
Exactly, and that's why it's hard to answer that question. You're probably more likely to have a greater likelihood to shut football down than you are golf. Sure. Just based on the nature of the sport and the proximity and so on. But again, the protocol would be, and what we did through this whole summer was, coach and AD would speak with the principal, they would call me, I would get in contact with the health department, we'd walk through all the necessary information, and then the health department will give us, it only happened one time this summer, in one particular sport, and at that time, the result was there was no reason to shut anything down. That particular student was isolated for 14 days, and that activity continued, and there was no other issue at all. But that's how we handled that.
Have you spoken since, Allegheny County yesterday said they are in on October? Have you spoken to the, officials groups? Are the officials groups on board with play?
That actually, we have a meeting set up tomorrow afternoon with the athletic directors and the county athletic directors from Allegheny, the West MAC, basically. We have a meeting, I think it's at 1:30 or 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, and that's a big part of the discussion is gonna be try to get schedules, if we decide to go. Try to get schedules, and then the way we do it in our conference is every one of our ADs is responsible for a specific sport for the conference, so that particular person then would reach out to that particular officiating group. And certainly, that's a big part of the conversation. If the officiating group says we're not doing it, then that impacts what we're doing too. Right.
So when you look at the pro sports and the college sports, they are aggressively testing every other day or before the games.
Yes.
I take it we don't have the resources to do that, or can we get the resources to do that?
My guess, based on other conversations, is probably no.
But if you want to be successful, you really need to do that, I think. But that's my opinion.
I don't think that would have to flow through the health department, basically, and I don't think they have that capability to test to that magnitude or extracurricular. Now, I'm speaking out of turn, they did not tell me that, I'm just basing that.
It might be worth reaching out to them and asking them.
Mr. Woods?
Yes.
Mr. Woods? This is Barbara. Actually, Mr. Stevens and I continue to work together to try and set up some more frequent and rapid testing. He doesn't have a plan in place for it yet, but he and I are continuing to speak almost every day, every other day, and he is trying to get that set up so that we can collaborate and get our folks tested more frequently and more rapidly. It's not in place yet, but we're making every effort to do so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I guess our first question is whether we decide on October
Yes.
7th to resume practice, and then October 27th, the first game.
October 27th would be the first competition date, with the exception of golf, which could actually start playing matches on October 7th.
One of the things too, I sent an email to each of the board members earlier this afternoon. We have been asked by the Allegheny County Board of Education to go in concert with them to send a letter to Governor Hogan requesting that he waive the 250% participants in outdoor venues to allow more people to come to outdoor events. The recommendation of that request is 50% of the capacity of that particular stadium or field or whatever the case may be. We've been asked to be a part of that. Now, we can do that as a separate vote tonight, whether we want to be a part of that letter or not. But
I'll do that as a second vote, personally.
yeah, we'll do it as a second vote.
You know, I read the letter,
Mm-hmm.
and I would add a lot to it, actually. I mean, they don't define what a group is in that letter. How do you define what a group is?
Well, when you read the directive that was redone,
I read it, but
it's pretty plain to me what they're trying to say.
well, I know, but if you go to 50% capacity, which is they're asking for, how do you get 6 foot separation?
You don't.
So,
Depends on the and listen, I watched the football game last Friday night at Parkers. I wasn't there. I watched it on my computer. A football game at a large, Parkersburg High School, which is 1,800 kids. They're only allowed to allow parents and grandparents. That's all that gets in there. So I watched that game, okay, and of course they keep showing you the crowd and everything. Listen, somebody's got a lot of parents, they got a lot of grandparents, but there's a lot more than just parents and grandparents in those stands. And the other thing that was disheartening for me personally was I might have counted 5 masks out of hundreds of people that were there. No one social distancing. So one of the things that's a logistic nightmare will be, just so we're all honest with one another, for the principal and for everyone else, is how are you going to supervise that?
yeah, what happens if somebody says, I'm not wearing a mask? What are you going to
What
do?
happened, it happened across the river from us, in Parkersburg, when we stay there. A lady came to a middle school football game, in Logan, Ohio. She was from Marietta. She refused to put her mask on. The AD went up and said, you'll need to put your mask on. It's a board policy. You must wear a mask. I will not put the mask on. She said that she was then told that she would be escorted out of off the field. A police officer came to escort her. She would not leave, so she ended up getting tased. And she did leave in handcuffs.
All that on the news.
And then she was being charged with, attacking a police officer, 400 or 500 charges. So,
So you just stop playing until they leave.
That's
Put a mask on, that's what I would do.
I think that
And they got the whole crowd ahead.
Inevitably, it's gonna happen more than likely, but I think a lot of it's how the athletic director or the principal or the SRO reacts to that. But there's also advertising, and I think most parents, when we say, if we decide to move forward and they want their kids to play and they want to be in the stadium, are gonna follow the rules because they wanna see it continue.
I would think so, but sure.
But I think you put the signs up, you put the markings on the ground, you put the emails out from the school, and because it is a local school decision, then, you know, you have every right to tell them they gotta leave and they can't come back. You have tools in the toolkit.
Well, it's the same thing as if people are throwing bottles on the field.
Tobacco would be a great example right
Yeah,
now. You
tobacco.
have to say no tobacco, even if you're 50 years old, it's not illegal, but it's a policy, you can't have it there.
Well, I mean, and you could always make, if people can't comply with this, you could always shut it down.
Which was what was gonna happen at that school in Pennsylvania. They weren't complying with the rules and they were.
If you think about logistics, if you have a football game between, let's say, Fort Hill and Northern, at Northern High School, you're not gonna have very many spectators there. Cause you're gonna, I mean, those two teams are gonna fill up half of the 250 with everybody that comes with them and part of them and officials. And, you know, I mean, for us to say that, you know,
The letter's a separate thing. I mean, I think it could be modified and changed a little bit, but I'm not sure I would sign off on what their demands are right now.
My thoughts on this, is that we're really doing it so the kids can play sport.
Yeah.
And if the parents, are able to get, I know they want to see their kids, but I think they want them to play more than, that's their main concern, is that they are able to play. So I think that is what we need to try to focus on more so than how many people can come. And I think as we move along, I think we'll be able to, hopefully this, wearing the mask and the 6 feet being one of those. I mean, I can't see the mask changing, but I can see possibly the 6 foot, requirement being lessened, so more people can attend.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think it's important that we think about, the needs of the student. Of course, you know, I'm sad that school is where it's at, okay? And I said no sports before we have them back in school. Well, we do have them back in school some, and unfortunately, we're stuck with the 6 foot, requirement, which is, taking up the space and causing us not to be able to bring everybody back for the full 5 days, what we normally had. So it's like a move forward for us. Hopefully everybody will try to be safe and understand the importance of that. I'd, you know, really like to get back to normal as much as we can.
you know, the great difference between this and education is this is purely voluntary. You don't have to participate.
Right.
Education, you do have to participate. So, you know, this is surely family decision.
Right.
Whether you want your child out. Yes, Jerry.
So to speak of family decision, let's just pose a hypothetical. There is a student and her family has determined that she's going to be in blue all year long. But she also wants to play high school soccer. Are we going to allow her to not go to in-person?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the short answer is yes.
Okay.
As long as it's our, as she's still,
She has to be enrolled as an.
in our blue,
County
right.
program.
If she were homeschooled, no, the answer
Right.
is no.
So we-
Yeah, if she withdrew to go homeschool, she would be eligible, but if she was a student, she wouldn't be.
Well, why don't we do the first question
Okay.
first? And
So-
I would make a motion that we,
Let's do this. Is there any more pressing questions before we move forward?
we gotta have a motion first.
Well, I'm gonna have a recommendation first.
Okay, I'm sorry. I wanna always,
Superintendent's gonna make a recommendation. One question first.
This says sports, and like you had said, in some things you've added band. Return to play. Again, just for clarification, is it only sports or is it like extracurricular, like that would maybe be, robotics and like mock trial, FFA, JROTC? I'm just trying, you know, like,
all of those, everything you just mentioned is already under this plan.
Okay,
So they all have the opportunity to participate under these same guidelines
right.
that the sports teams are. So my recommendation would be, if you all decide to allow sports to go forward on October the 7th, that we would also include all of those other groups under the same guidelines and safety.
That was the reason I asked Karen to put it down as an extracurricular activity, action tonight, because all activities should be included. Anything that we have as a present activity that we, have as in our school system should be a part of this. The other thing, one quick thing, and then we'll get superintendent's recommendation, take a vote. Coaching is also voluntary, because there may be coaches who have already signed contracts with us, not knowing what's happening this year. I want them to know, certainly from you, that that is a decision, personal decision they're going to make. If they want to coach, and that's wonderful, we'll pay them the stipend. If they decide that, nope, it's just really not something I want to get involved in, we understand that as well.
Absolutely.
I'm trying to find somebody to take their place. So, okay, Superintendent Baker, it's up to you.
Well, thank you. I'm still here, and I've listened to every question, and I think we've been able to answer them, hopefully to the board's satisfaction and to the public. So I am recommending that we allow sports and extracurricular activities to move forward on October 7th, and allow our kids to get back, like I said, to the activities that they really enjoy as part of their school career. So my recommendation is to support the October 7th start.
Okay. There is recommendation by the superintendent for Garrett County to be a part of the new plan, which begins on October 7th. I need a motion to such.
I'll move that we do that.
Moved by Rodney,
Second.
seconded by Charlotte, that we move to Garrett County Public Schools into the extracurricular activities that will begin on practicing on October 7th, as a part of the state's new plan that they've presented. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And it is a unanimous vote. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Now, let's talk about the request from Allegheny County for us to participate with them in a letter to the governor to allow for a clarification of terminology, and also to allow for more participants, or actually more spectators, to be a part of outdoor activities. Any discussion? I know, Ronnie, you have some concerns about the way the letter is.
Well, they talk about 6-foot distance between groups or individuals. What's a group? Is a 5-member family a group? How do you define that? And, so you could cluster people around, close together, and then keep 6 feet between groups. But you know how it's going to go with these games and everything. They're going to want to get up and go see their friends and, those kind of things. I think the clarification on here, if it just said 250, I'm not sure why they're counting referees and coaches and
The players asked that question today to Steve Shue, and he responded in kind and said that the count includes everyone in the area.
I know, but that has nothing to do with
Inside
it.
and outside. I can
So the
understand.
100
I can
inside will
understand.
count the players and the referees.
That's 100.
It's
Okay,
100. And
okay.
outside's 250.
So let
I
me,
think
Well,
I-
the way it reads, and I haven't even looked right here.
It's always going to be the 100. Yeah, I'm just making sure what it's always.
And that's, I think, why they asked for.
But I don't know.
I mean, inside
You
makes
might have
sense, but outside,
That the venue will be smaller type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you got a gym, yeah, only 650.
But it says the total number of persons permitted in an outdoor sports
Facility or venue shall not exceed at any one time the lesser of 50% of the maximum occupancy or 250.
So last night at the Ravens game, I watched a little bit of that. I thought I heard them say the 250 people that are here. I thought I even heard one of the announcers even mention that.
Well,
because
Major League Sports are a whole separate category of the executive board. And, they did have family,
Yeah, they have family
members there last night. But it also, even that,
But they specifically in the professional sports,
under A2 of the order says, spectator means a person
at a sports facility who is not at the facility for the purpose of engaging in the sport. So they're exempting the pros, the players, and the officials and everyone else, but it.
Yeah, ours is two different
Go
ways
over
to
to
do
fifty
that.
just for those.
So what I would support would be a letter that says, match it up with the spectators, more so than going
Yeah,
to what they're saying.
if it's gonna be 250, let's eliminate the, players and the coaches. And then you have a reasonable chance of getting the family members in to see their kids play, at least. You know, they're,
Yeah, I think the idea is.
these are state guidelines, so good luck getting anything changed on it.
Yeah. Well, do we want to take a vote, or do you want me just to work with, Allegheny County and indicate that, you know, we're comfortable trying to eliminate the players and all the officials from the 250, but we are okay with the 250 if it just means spectators?
Well, I mean, how many seats are in Fort Hills,
They're probably,
stadium?
About 6,000-7,000.
So you have 3,000 people there, according to what they want, and you really want our parents and everything to go down there, and where the positivity rates are much higher, and it just, I'll be worried that it's gonna promote spread.
Yeah, 50% is a lot, isn't it?
50%, what's our seating capacity?
Oh, gosh.
I'm not 100% sure, but
It's definitely, you're gonna be a couple thousand.
Couple thousand.
and that's just the seating, because you have all the.
Yeah, everybody's around it.
Standing around and everything.
We might not be allowed, you might not allow people to stand.
Well, we better allow them to stand, because they can spread out a little bit.
yeah.
Where they can sort of.
If you enforce the 6 foot, and like we do at restaurants, they say, you know, no more than 6 to a table, and the 6 have to be of the immediate household.
Right.
I mean, granted, it's gonna be a nightmare to police.
Yeah, you're not gonna.
Yeah, that's the other thing of opening up to 50% capacity. I think it would be so much harder to enforce. At 250, you have a reasonable shot, and it would be the family members who are missing.
But Charlotte's correct, our main objective is
our
to get the
objective is to
kids
get the
out
kids
to play and have their, I think it's reasonable how their parents
Yeah.
watch them and come out to watch them participate. I mean, basically, that's all shows up the band outings anyway, the parents of the kids. And I also think if band asks you to try to work something out that allows us to do competition, that we work with other counties.
I've talked with those guys quite often,
The difficulty with the band competition is gonna try to be to get other,
people, just other, you know, to have a competition.
bring in 8 schools or whatever, that might be challenging.
Yeah, that's gonna be hard, but,
But at least the door's open. I mean, we can give them.
Maybe there could be something with the Allegheny.
Do we now do away on October 7th? Do we now do away with spring practice?
Yeah. So, I'm glad you asked that. So for everyone listening and,
Talking with Allegheny County today, talking with RADs,
Allegheny County from,
what I understand will start basically tomorrow, the next day, with fall sport conditioning, because they took our plan,
basically, we're doing what we're doing.
so they're gonna deviate from that.
I think we're gonna look at starting on the 5th to finish up. So we're not doing Wednesdays right now, we're not doing weekends. With this decision, I'm assuming we will go Wednesdays and weekend, obviously not Sunday, because that's against the COVID race, but we would go to, because we're gonna have to play some Sunday,
Or, I'm sorry, some Saturday competition. So we're gonna open Wednesdays and,
Saturdays back up.
so that would be a change of what we're doing, and we're gonna start, and then everything else then will follow.
All these timelines. So our plan will cease to exist on Friday at 6 o'clock. And we'll go in on Monday with 2 days of fall conditioning, probably getting some equipment, so on and so forth. And Wednesday would be then the beginning of the fall sports season in Garrett County.
Okay, facility-wise, the field at Northern will be playable by football and soccer by the 24th.
Just walked it today with Mr. Wazlowski. There are some things that need to be finished, and, Mr. Wazlowski assures me that they will be finished. Southern, the field's supposed to be done Friday, the playing surface, and then the ancillary stuff, you know, as far as blacktop and the ends, the track part and everything else is supposed to be done by October the 31st. We did talk at length about facilities today. Northern should be good to go. Probably not maybe on the 7th, but definitely by the
14th or later, they can still practice on their practice field. Southern still has their old facility that they can utilize. We did talk,
You know, it would be a shame for this year's seniors that aren't gonna have a next year if we have that beautiful facility and we don't let them use it at all. Even if there's no lights or bleachers, we could play a Saturday game there in the daytime. And, you know, a lot of youth league places, parents have to take lawn chairs because there's no seating. I think we can make it work, at both places, but as a fallback at Southern in particular, they still have their old facilities that they could use. And we can schedule, we don't have a schedule together.
Right.
So once we schedule, we can play maybe 2 weeks on the road. I'm thinking football, but it could be soccer. We're gonna play 2 weeks on the road before we come back home. Our guys know that, and we'll have some flexibility.
Well,
Do we televise these games? Can we stream those games?
I was gonna say that was a thing too.
we got last year through National Federation of High School Network. We do have cameras in both gyms, and we had cameras on both football fields.
But we didn't do it at football last year because those cameras came in about December, so we didn't have a chance to
Activate them on the soccer and football. So,
Northern's is set up and ready to go. Southern's is up too, but if we move down to the lower field, they wouldn't have that.
Right.
But if they played up on the upper field, that's capable. But in the gyms, to go back to the 100-person,
Yeah.
we do for wrestling, volleyball, girls and boys basketball, we do have that capability.
I mean, I'm watching professional football on TV, and it's no different to me whether there's a crowd there or not. It's still the same game.
Right, and that would cut down on how many people needed to be there.
Well, it would give them an opportunity.
It would be a good option.
You know, if you're a fan of the Northern and Southern football team, you could sit in your living room and watch it on your,
absolutely.
if the quality was good and the announcing is good.
Is it still gonna cost the same to get into a game?
Yes.
Your gate
Yeah.
receipts will be a lot lower.
Well, it certainly is, and,
You know, the revenue of the athletic department.
We've talked as a board that certainly the board will have to look at, how the two athletic departments have been impacted financially. And we will have to step up with something.
Can you come up with a plan to work all these logistics based on the recommendations that just came out 3 or 4 days ago? How would you deal with 250, you know, do you provide tickets to the opposing team, or do you say you're only gonna have, tickets are gonna be what's left over after our fans actually use up the tickets? I mean, how's that gonna work? How's the food stand gonna work? How's the testing gonna work, and the contact tracing and all that type of thing? I mean, I think it would be really good to have that in place before we start competition in October 20th.
we already have the contact tracing and everything's in place. But we all work with, the conversation today in county really revolved around spectators and what that looks like, who that looks like. And at first, we thought players were exempt, but now we know as of right now they're not, so that changes the but yeah, everyone will be well aware of what's going on.
I would be okay on a letter that just says we'd be comfortable with the recommendation to exempt the players and the coaches and the
I can get back to Mr.
cheerleaders that are down there.
President, let her know that we're not in favor of 50% capacity waiver, but we are in favor of taking, making the 250 families
spectators only and the 100
Yeah.
band spectators only.
I respectfully ask that if you do that, you specifically mention the bands would be exempt from
Yeah.
that as well.
Yeah,
As
that's-
part of the
Yeah, sure. I mean, put cheerleaders, bands,
Yeah.
officials, game officials, et cetera.
People that are not in the stands.
But then how about the parents of those also? Not just the athletes, but the parents of the band and the
Yeah, I
cheerleaders?
think it's available for them too.
Well, if you start exempting parents and everybody else.
No, I'm not exempting them, but they would be part of the allowable.
Part of the 250.
You could have the language of what it has under professional sports,
Yeah.
engaging in sporting or other customary operations
Yeah.
related to the.
Yeah.
So they would be exempt, but then their, like, if
Their parents get a
the
ticket.
cap is at 250 spectators, is it the first 250?
Well, I like, the one part about the West Virginia one I like, is it specifically says to the ADs and the principals, parents, the people who live in the household, and grandparents can come. That's it.
And they
Yeah, but
tickets.
the question is whether the parents of the band members.
No, they can do all that. In West Virginia, the bands play at halftime. I mean, they're there. They actually play before. So their parents are a part of that.
So all the parents are participants, one way or another. and
Yes.
Cheerleaders,
Cheerleaders, yes. Now, when let's use, 75, let's use 80 people for Southern High School. It includes cheerleaders, band, players, everybody, 80 people. You multiply, now you've got 160 that you've already committed to, theoretically. 160 people that you committed to. If 250 is the number, and you've only got 90 to give to the opposing team.
oh, I'm sorry.
They probably shouldn't be traveling.
When you're the traveling team, you know what all it is.
Yeah, probably not. No, that's the issue too, right, off the deck. I know.
So review what,
But that's a transportation question.
okay, review what we're actually discussing right now. We're discussing whether to go along with this letter or not.
Mhm.
Okay, and in the letter, they're saying, 50%. We suggest a 50% capacity for spectators without a number limitation and strike the balance between public safety and allowing families to watch their sons and daughters engage in competition. So what you're saying is that you're bothered with the 50% capacity.
I don't think it's possible to get a separation of 6 feet between, if you do 50%.
Okay, are they still holding us under the 6 feet?
Yeah,
I mean, you're gonna have family groups, they're gonna all sit together, because they've been together all day.
it says groups, that's groups or individuals, 6 feet.
I also prefer the 250 because of the enforcement issues related to.
If you bring 3,000 people in the stadium, you're not gonna enforce anything.
Well, but,
300 or 400.
well,
But 250 is the number with professional. I think the only chance you have is to mirror what's there to get changed.
Could you do 250 per team? On the outside?
250 total. Wait, I've been playing, my kids have been playing soccer all fall long, and depending on where we're going, which county we're going in West Virginia, you can either have one parent per child or 2 parents per child, and that's it. You can't have grandparents, you can't have this, you can't have that. But the West Virginia Soccer Association officials are going to every event. And if a soccer club isn't wearing a mask, parents aren't wearing a mask, that club gets shut down. So the culture is such that they know you have to abide by these rules so your kids can keep playing their sport. You know, if we just say, that we really want you to have your sporting event, I'm sorry, you can only have 1 or 2 people buy a subscription to our thing. We'll move it at Southern so you can watch it. I mean, I just.
Well, I think Charlotte hit the nail on the head. This is about kids, it's not about parents, it's not about, Board of Education members, it's not about grandparents, it's not about anything. It's about kids being able to get out and play. And so, I like to watch it on TV, I'm none of those things. I have to give me a subscription.
Sometimes you have to drive the kid to the event, so you better be able to get in if you drive them there.
But I do think we should say to Allegheny County, we're not in favor of the 50% as a board, we're not in favor of that. However, this is what we would be in favor of. Now, whether they want to go along with that or not, my idea, and in talking with her, is they won't want to go along with our idea. They want to go, they want to get that big amount of people for the $40.
It's money.
Let's face it,
Yeah.
the $40 game.
Yeah, because it's either the 250 or the 50%. So we're feeling like the 50% here is probably, going to get the parents in, and,
So we can't manage that amount of people.
We think 250, you could probably get parents and grandparents at a distance, maybe. If the grandparents would wanna go.
I think you can get, I think at 250, you can get the parents in of both teams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if it's on television, I don't wanna go out.
I think we can change that too. I mean, as the metrics get better, I mean, to start, we can start.
Only the governor can change that.
That's what bothers
That's
me.
all,
Yeah.
this is trying to get a directive change anyway that he might not.
Well, and they tend sometimes to change.
They might change
They
that.
might change their own. Right, we won't know
2 weeks from now to
So
say hours.
I think just, what you're saying, Tom, is the better approach, because.
Yeah.
You sort of can do it like they do in college athletics. You could say, okay, on Monday, Matthew, here's your 2 tickets for your family. Give them to whoever you want to. Brandon, here's your 2 tickets for your family. Give them to whoever you want to. That's all you're gonna get, okay? And you use a new ticket every week, and you send to the other team the amount of tickets you want to send to them.
That's how we have to do it, and the other thing is, we focus this conversation, which is natural, because all of our conversations today,
I think we're thinking football, soccer, and volleyball won't be the same issue.
basketball will be, boys and girls, football will be, and wrestling.
Other than that, most of the other ones, cross-country, golf, no issue whatsoever. Those will be very easy.
I like the idea of what you just said, allotting a number of tickets per
And I think that's
athlete.
what Preston's doing from what, something similar to that.
Yeah. All right.
Easy way to
I think we're good.
Everybody's treated fairly that way.
Just negotiate with, Tammy on the letter.
Well,
If we could set the rest.
I was gonna say, if they don't, I would be in favor of just sending one that says from us about the participants.
would you care to?
You could just mimic theirs and put
Yeah.
250.
Yes, I think that's what I'll do.
Change the word
Yes.
spectator.
And throw in the things that say about the professionals, that these
Yeah.
people don't count.
Yeah.
That's fine.
I can.
No, I can do that. I can do that.
Monica.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike.
I agree with what Ms. Diebold said about getting the kids to play, but if we would get to where we say 50%, we'd have a lot of parents saying, well, how can we do 50% for sports? We're not even 50% capacity at our schools.
Right.
And we can't forget that team part of it first. That's,
And that's
you know, like that, yeah. I mean, we could, but
Okay. Keep your eye on what we're trying to do. We're trying to get the kids to really have a good experience in playing sports and competitions and with limited amount of spectators.
Allison.
But by that time, we will be in school. With it still like.
Yeah, 50%,
We don't have an outbreak.
It's still a hybrid though.
Competition starts is when we should be at that part where we're.
in our school.
Well, we'll be as close as we're gonna get to having a full school.
That's why it's important we don't have an.
But you're still gonna be 6 feet separation in school. And I don't think you can get that 60%.
Not there.
Because it's benches. I mean, you have to sit, your capacity is based on sitting right next to the guy next to you, right? All right. Or what?
Well, then, like,
It's not the official again,
if
basketball.
you're in the same house,
Basketball,
the mom and dad, you're gonna sit together.
They're all set together, sure.
Right.
It should.
So you, so, I mean, yeah.
Although there's only 10 players on that basketball team, so.
Your tickets are.
Okay, if there are no further, I will reach out to her. I would text her, email her tonight, tell her our decision about going back, and also reach out to her about the letter, and I'll draft a letter, send it to all of you, before I send it to her, see if it's okay with each of the board members. Thank you so much. I know it's,
Yeah, thanks, Bob.
it's going to be a very interesting year for you.
It already has.
We'll get more.
Don't forget about the television, that'd be.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Barb, do you have anything you want to add before we adjourn?
I do not. Just thank you so much for, voting to get our kids back to the activities. But, that's all I have for this evening. Thank you.
Okay, we'll get well soon.
Hope you feel better.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I know how it is, to injure yourself.
Pandemic.
Okay, I need a motion.
I've been there.
to adjourn.
There it is.
We have a motion by Matthew to adjourn, seconded by Rodney. Those in favor of adjourning till the